Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast. I'm Blair Kirchhoff. It's June 10th, 2025, and on today's show, we are talking college sports. Big changes are on the way. Starting with the upcoming school year, for the first time, schools will be able to make direct payment to athletes. At the highest level of sports, Division I, which includes the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the ACC, and others, schools will be able to pay up to $20 million to its football, basketball, baseball, volleyball players, and more. Most of the major schools have said they intend to fully fund their athletes, and that in itself will present revenue challenges to the universities. On today's show, we discuss the new college sports landscape with Star College beat writers Kellis, Robinett, and Shreyas, Laddha. We also get into what happens with NIL money and discuss other issues in college sports. Okay, let's get started by asking Kellis and Shreyas, guys, do you have any eligibility left?
I think I'm out. Unfortunately.
That's too bad, because if you were a football player, the way I calculate this, you would, if the average applies here, and we'll get into the exact amounts here in a minute, you could make up to $176,000 a year as a football player. Not bad for an 18-year-old freshman. Basketball's even more. So what do you think about this, guys? Kellis, let's start with you. This is the result of a settlement of several lawsuits, and the ruling came down on Friday, which is going to allow Kansas State, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Iowa, all the schools, all the major college schools will have $20.5 million in a pool to pay its athletes. And look, college athletes have been getting money now for several years through NIL, and before that, maybe some under the table payments, other ways of getting compensated. But now it's like professional sports. These athletes are going to get paid through the university. How different does that seem or feel to you?
Yeah, the word amateurism is kind of gone now. Maybe at some levels of college sports that there are still people out there who are just, doing it for a scholarship or the dream of walking on someplace. But at the top of the sport, it's all pro. It's basically minor leagues. We even see some players right now declare for the NBA draft and say, no, I can make more money in college than I can in the NBA, so I'm coming back. So that kind of tells you the state of things. I will say, though, overall, in theory, I like the change. I really like the idea of everybody having the same payments, kind of like a salary cap you see in pro sports, and having a level playing field. In practice is where I just want to see what happens here. Are schools going to follow these rules? Are they going to all say, okay, we're going to spend just this much, and actually try to bring back some rules here and proceed on a level playing field? Or are people going to circumvent these rules and go back to kind of some old ways before this started in the first place, and finding new ways to pay players beyond what they've stated? And that's kind of the big mystery here is are people going to give in and play by these new rules, or are they going to still keep doing their own thing? I guess that'll probably tell us how good or poorly these new changes work.
Yeah, we'll get into the NIL portion of this in a moment. But the House settlement, the salary cap, as you called it, Kellis, and that's exactly what it is. There's a limit to the number of dollars that can be spent on athletes this school year. It's a money that it's a number that will go up incrementally over the years. This is for the 2025-26 school year. It's $20.5 million. I'm not exactly sure how they settled on that figure. Maybe one of you guys know this, but that's the number. And that's and we didn't even talk about the is it $2.8 billion in back pay that schools, am I right about that, Shreyas, that schools are going to have to pay athletes from the previous decade? I think it's 10 years.
Yeah, I believe so. I know a lot of pro athletes on Twitter are being like, okay, well, when am I getting my check is what I've seen on Twitter.
That's going to be the rallying cry of all college athletes now. When is my check going to get here?
No, I think it's interesting. Because I was thinking about this and I was talking, thinking about the fact that before I joined the Star, I was covering UConn men's basketball, and UConn, as we know, is a basketball school, both men and women's basketball. Their football program isn't particularly good. Those Big East schools where football is either non-existent or not a big thing, are they going to have an advantage now if they can use the full 20.5 million? Like I have a friend of mine that covers Memphis. Obviously they're trying to get to a Power Five conference or Power Four conference. And their ADs come out and said they're not going to get the full 20.5 million the first year. They're not going to raise that amount. They're going to try and get as much as they can and put it towards basketball. And I'm curious to see if it'll be an inherent advantage for these schools that don't have to pay football programs that much money. And, it's going to be interesting to see if everybody in the Big 12 in this conference is going to get the 20.5 million. I think they will, but I think there might be some schools begrudgingly getting the 20.5 million and putting it out there. And just overall, I think it's going to be really interesting to kind of see how it plays out. I think, especially for Kansas's case right now, we know that the bread and butter is basketball, but they've invested a lot of money in the football program with the stadium, with all the stuff that's been going on. There's been a lot of kind of behind the scenes rumors of, football expenditures kind of cutting into basketball budget. I don't know how true that is. But I do know, with Darren Williams and stuff like that, it came out from multiple places. And from what I heard, they were outbid by NC State, for his services. So it is going to be really interesting to see these guys that command, $3, $4, $5 million. Are they going to command that with this salary cap? I don't think so. The guys that are making that $4 million this summer, who were just above average starters on a Big 12 team and transferred elsewhere, like Williams is a good example of that. I think we'd see their payment cut in half, really, just to match the salary cap, and if not less than that. So just to see how all these schools adapt. I know Travis Goff, Kansas ADs, come out and supported the new legislation. I texted him a few days ago, hoping to sit down with him and talk fully about how they have the split and everything else. But it's going to be fascinating to kind of see how these schools do it, especially in the Big 12, where there are certain schools that are basketball focused. There are other schools that are football focused.
I know Jamie Pollard, the Iowa State athletic director, has said that there are other schools in the league that might have a financial advantage over his school, and that in a few years that the Cyclones could fall behind. We'll see if that's true. But Kellis, how is this going to work? What's sort of the breakdown of maybe the percentages that at least we're reading about when it comes to just distributing the money to football, to basketball, and then to other sports?
Yeah, well, it's going to vary from school to school. That's kind of the unique thing about this is how does every athletic director, how does every campus decide to split up the $20 million? Do you give it mostly to football? I think most schools in the Big 12 are going to do that. And then once you devote most of your resources to football, where do you give the rest? And that's kind of where it gets interesting. To schools like Kansas or Arizona put more aside for men's basketball? Does a team like TCU or Baylor put more aside for women's basketball? I don't know. I think those are things that they're going to have to explore. I know Texas Tech has been quite transparent with it. They've said they want to devote about 15 million of the pie to football, which obviously would mean they only have 3 or 4 million for basketball, which to Shreyas' point would be interesting because JT Toppin this year is supposed to make $4 million all by himself. So moving forward, how do you keep making these basketball players happy who last year were getting 2 million, 4 million, and now that's what the entire team is getting? I don't know. That'll be one hurdle they'll have to get clear and figure out. I know at Kansas State, I talked to Gene Taylor about this. He said the expectation was K-State football would get around 13 to 14 million, which obviously big part of the pie. Men's basketball around 4 million, and then the other sports would split it down the way, whatever's right. Women's basketball, then baseball, and so forth. So yeah, it's every going to be a general manager. Every AD is going to be a general manager trying to figure out how to allocate their money. And the one thing that is interesting about this is forms of this have been going on for a while. Like college baseball coaches for the longest time, we've only had 13 scholarships to split up with 25, 30 players. They had to figure out how to allocate all those funds, and now everybody's kind of doing it just on a bigger scale. And that's the new world we're in.
Yeah, I think to kind of go with your point, Kellis, the money thing is really interesting to me because I had a lot of parents and agents and even players tell me that we're all in a rush to sign in April because they didn't know when the house settlement was coming in and they were afraid that they weren't going to be able to get the full amount of money. I know, for example, with Kansas, Flory Badunga's guardian told me that he'd heard from a lot of parents that everyone's in a rush because they thought the settlement was going to come in a month ago, when this thing. So everyone was like, let me get my money now before potentially it having me cut in half, if not more than that. And especially with basketball, I mean, we know, the numbers are out there for these guys like Darren Peterson, AJ from Monza, from, BYU, reportedly $8 million. Kansas reportedly paying $6 million for Darren Peterson. Those numbers are not going to even exist at this point in time, at least at Kansas or Kansas State, I think, with this coming into a factor, unless obviously NIL money.
Yeah, and well, PJ Haggerty, what is it, $2 million, Kellis, for him on the heels of $2 million for Coleman Hawkins? Yeah, I'm left to wonder if these types of numbers. I mean, technically they'll continue to be available. Let's take NIL out of the equation here, but just in the school salary cap, they'll be available, but they could bust a budget, couldn't they? If we're talking about those kinds of dollars from your 20 or $20.5 million pool.
Yeah, and that's where coaches are going to have to get creative. You only have so much money to spend. So if you want a player like Coleman Hawkins, PG Haggerty, or Darren Peterson at KU, and they want, say they want $2 million. Okay, that sounds great. But then how do you recruit the rest of the roster around him? Great question. And that's kind of what I was going back beginning. Are people going to, firmly say, I only have this much money to spend, or are we going to get creative and bring in some NIL payments that hope they get cleared, or just go old school and arrange for somebody to give them money under the table? I don't know. And there's been a lot of speculation that it's going to be hard for somebody to, for the clearinghouse or whatever, the new NIL.
The new enforcement organization, the College Sports Commission.
Yeah. They're saying that any deal, over $600 needs to be, an actual endorsement deal. It can't just be pay for play. And that sounds great, yes, but what happens when the first player complains and tries to sue to get their own way? I don't know. And that's kind of a big question here. Is our team's going to say this is the money we have to spend and we're going to stick to it? Or are they going to find creative ways to keep paying these players more and more money and get football rosters up to $40 and $50 million like they are right now? And that'll be something we all have to navigate.
All right. If we look at the kind of estimate what an average major college sports budget would look like when it comes to payment of players. Let's just take this upcoming season at $20 million just to make the math work better. And the number that I've seen, and we've talked about this a little bit, the percentages, number I've seen is being thrown about is 75% of that would go to football players, 15% to men's basketball players, and then 10% to all the other athletes on campus. So if we broke that down and gave those sports their full amount of scholarships, 75% of $20 million comes out to about 175,000 per player. Obviously, that's just the average. Some would get more, some would get less. Basketball, it would be about $15 million for football, about $3 million for basketball if it's 15 scholarship players, so about 200,000 per, and then $2 million for all the other sports. And I estimated about 200 scholarship athletes, which would come out to about $10K per athlete. Now, look, we know that the Texas Tech softball pitcher is $1 million pitcher, so that's that type of salary kind of throws everything off. But does this sound like maybe a reasonable objective or blueprint for schools to follow, Kellis, that 75, 15, 10, and it's kind of with possible exceptions for the exceptional basketball player or the incredible softball pitcher or the baseball player who you're bidding, who might be an overall number one draft pick that you're bidding against, that you've got to come up with a little bit more money for them. But does does the math sound about right?
I mean, I think it sounds great, but I'm old enough to remember when players didn't get paid.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that's
uh,
true.
if we would have gone if we would have gone straight from strict amateurism, no, every kind of payment is illegal, to this, I think people would say this is great. Quarterback gets $2 million, backup linebacker gets 100K. Nobody is going to complain about that. I think the thing that's tricky is that we've had these gray years in between where people are making up to $4 or $5 million to come out and play one season, and everybody's a free agent. Now people are trying to find the happy medium again. I do think in time that, yes, I think these numbers will work. And as you said earlier, the number will potentially go up in future years. So as that happens, I think things will work themselves out. It's just a question of how long it takes for us to get to that point where everybody says, okay, this is working. Because there's definitely going to be a transition period, just like everything.
Yep. So Shreyas, I know somebody who believes in this system and knows it's going to work, and that's Travis Goff. What was his reaction on that? That was interesting. His reaction on social media the other day.
Yeah, I think The Athletic, Justin Williams, put out an article about basically mostly negative about sources blasting the new thing. I like to say this. I think with anything new, it feels like there's always these articles that come out from some outlet that says a bunch of nonsense of how, oh, this is the worst thing ever, blah, 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 because coaches don't know how to react. And then in a year or two later, everyone's like, well, it really wasn't as bad as we thought it was. And I think Travis came out and said basically the same thing of like, this is not as bad as everyone's making it out to be. Kansas is excited for the new normal, this thing. And I think, the one thing that the Travis Goff tenure has done, I think, at Kansas is they've always had a game plan. So they've probably been preparing for this for months, if not whatever, year long, however long they've kind of anticipated. And they probably have a game plan of how things are going to go. And I'm really intrigued to kind of see what he thinks about it, and hoping to sit down with him sometime this week is what he told me. He said, be down to do that and, chat about it all, and kind of talk about what the split's going to look like. Cause for me, this is Kansas basketball. If it's 20.5 million, you presume Kansas basketball is at least 6 million of that, because it's Kansas basketball. Football obviously has had a significant investment with the stadium and everything ongoing with that, but everyone knows the bread and butter of this school and everything it's known for is basketball. So I'm intrigued to kind of see where Travis kind of sits on that. And I think Travis knows that the expenditures and the money raising, come in from football, but basketball is always going to be the thing that, Kansas is going to hang their hat on. So I'm intrigued to kind of see how the split goes. And, it seems like he's been very upfront about how excited he is about this new rev share and all that. So, I'm sure Kansas has a plan in place, and, they've had a lot of, things happen behind the scenes with their NIL stuff. So it'll be intriguing to kind of see how the salary cap affects their ability to recruit and add people. I could see it helping out Bill Self, honestly. I don't know if it's a hot take to say that, but they've been outbid by some players, by some schools this past year. So having a salary cap, and finding the right talent, guys who are European, guys who, might not command as much money, is going to be such a skill that is an underrated asset to have. And, who better than Bill Self to find that?
Take a swing at picking sports this baseball season with Underdog. Playing on their app is as easy as choosing higher or lower on players' stats. Get them right, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. Sign up today using promo code KCSTAR to get a gimme pick as a part of your first cash entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you deposit. Must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org.
Kellis, you mentioned it a little while ago. We touched on the NIL, and yes, there's a kind of a new law, a new rule about players will have to kind of justify NIL deals that are worth more than $600. It goes through a clearinghouse, and they have to be for valid business purposes. Kind of what NIL, name, image, and likeness, was intended to be from the beginning. Not a recruit, not a tool for recruitment or an inducement, but basically a player using his name, image, and likeness. So I guess my question is, does this mean no more lavender Corvettes for players like Avery Johnson?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe they'll just mean a bunch of $599 cars instead instead of.
I've driven $599 cars in my life.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. In the case of the car, you know, I think something like that would still work because it's not like they're rolling up and saying just here, take the car. They have a lot of publicity that has gone into it. They shoot videos. They do photo shoots. They make it very clear that Avery Johnson, the dealership is very proud to say that Avery Johnson is driving their vehicle. So if that were to go in front of the clearinghouse, I think that would be approved. They're actually, coming out and doing commercials and stuff. But yes, the deals of, or the days of, any company just saying, or any private fan saying, "Hey, here's $1 million. I'll see you at my kid's birthday party next month." That might not be in play anymore. And that's another just great question. A mystery looking forward is how strict are these enforcements going to be? Because you want to think that they'd be harsh and would want to shut down a lot of these things because they are getting money from schools now. But at the same time, if somebody's willing to pay me money to do anything, if somebody came in and said, no, that's not a valid deal, I'd be pretty upset about it. So again, that's just something that we're going to have to wait and see on.
Wow, you come cheap, Kellis.
Compared to a college athlete, my price is a lot lower, if anyone's listening.
I wondered if an athlete could start his own GoFundMe page and get income that way. So look, Missouri has hired a basketball general manager, Tim Fuller, who worked at Missouri previously, was actually Tim Duncan's teammate at Wake Forest back in the day. Has Kansas or Kansas State hired a general manager yet?
They have one for football, and Chris Klieman has said he's been a godsend. He said it had examples where assistant coaches will come in and say, "I really love this player," and they'll kick the name up to their general manager. He'll do some quick research and say either yes, we can afford him, or no, we can't. Cross them off the list, and it's streamlined everything. Jerome Tang has talked about doing that, but I think he just looks at it more of as in a team effort. We're going to do this together. They don't have somebody strict on that spot. But I do believe that within the next few years, the way this is going, especially with a firm salary cap, I think you really need one. I think that's going to be very commonplace. I think it's going to be more normal than not to see a general manager on all of these staffs.
Yeah, KU football has one with basketball. I asked Self about it, I think, around mid-season or near the end of the season. And he said, we've thought about it. It's not something out of the realm of possibility. And I was, what are you looking for if you get a general manager? And kind of what I expected. He's like, I want somebody who's going to be a fundraiser, somebody who's going to be able to go out there and get money and dollars for these kids and stuff like that. So, but I don't anticipate it happening. Like I'd be very surprised if a general manager happens in the Self era. I don't know how many years he has left at Kansas, but it's hard to kind of relinquish control when you've been at an institution for so long, and to be able to trust somebody to be able to go out and do something as well as you do it, and as well as he's done it over the years, is something I just don't know if I see Bill Self doing.
So that's not part of Jacques Vaughn's job description, is it? He's just pure assistant coach?
Yeah, pure assistant coach. I know he's going to be working closely with Darren Peterson, is what I've heard. And, I also expect him to kind of be a guy that will entice a lot of guys who want to play in the NBA and be like, well, I coach Kevin Durant and James Harden and Kyrie Irving, et cetera. Why wouldn't you come to Kansas? I thought Jacques was like his pickup by Kansas is so underrated because everyone likes to talk about, next head coach in waiting. I'm not even worried about that. at the end of the day, you just need more NBA talent. Last year's team had no guys who were going to get drafted, besides maybe Hunter Dickinson late second round or undrafted free agent, whatever, on the team. This year, they have multiple players that could potentially be picked outside Darren Peterson. And then that goes a long way in kind of building a team that's going to make a deep tournament run.
Yeah, so no preseason #1 ranking for the Jayhawks this year. You're not expecting.
I don't expect it. I mean, to be honest with you, I look into the roster right now. If they don't pick up anybody, I know they've been linked to a French kid. Bryce Desert is his name. He's a backup center. They said Bill talked about wanting to pick up another guard, which I was a little surprised about, and a backup center. I think doing those two things can make them better. But looking at the roster right now, I think there's some clear worries for me. Their 3-point shooting, not to harp on it like I do every time we talk about the Jayhawks, but the last 2 years, they have one guy on the roster last year who shot above 35% from three in college basketball. So to me, there's a lot of unknowns, and you're hoping guys like Marco Jackson or Jamar McDowell, one of those guys takes a leap, and you hope the transfers are as good as advertised. But I do like the makeup of this team compared to last year, and I think the big thing is they built around a generational type talent, a guy like, Andrew Wiggins is Darren Peterson. I mean, that's what Bill Self has kind of compared him to. So you feel like the ceiling of the program might be higher than it was last year.
And, of course, it's a ferocious basketball conference with the likes of Houston and Arizona, Iowa State, Baylor. It's a great basketball conference. And not a bad football conference either, Kellis. I've seen some over-unders for the season for the league in Kansas State, if not at the top, close to the top. You think that's justified for the Wildcats? I think I've seen 8.5 for an over-under for the Cats.
Yeah, 8.5 is the over-under. Tentatively, you look at it and want to say, boy, over looks pretty tasty right here. But at the same time, Chris Klieman has only cleared that number one time in the regular season in Kansas State, the year they won the Big 12 championship in 2022. Every other year, they seem to go 8-4 and then win their bowl game. That's how they get to 9 wins. So that doesn't count, by the way. If you get to 9 wins and you need the bowl together, that does not count as an over. So yeah, honestly, for them, it really depends a lot on how that first game goes in Ireland. They haven't had the most luck against Iowa State, but the one year they did beat them with Klieman, won the Big 12. So they win that one, start 1-0, both all and a Big 12 play. Maybe they can get there. I will say I do think it's justified. I think they'll be one of the top 4 teams in the conference. It's just breaking through to be in those top 2. That just depends on a lot of things. How the players develop, who stays healthy, who stays hurt, how does the schedule break? I mean, just like last year, when the schedules came out, I thought K-State had a hard schedule and KU had an easy schedule. KU ended up having one of the hardest schedules in the country.
Yep.
They played a ranked team every week. It's unbelievable. And it was kind of the same thing. I thought Arizona State and BYU were going to be bad, and they turned out to be the 2 of the best. I didn't think Colorado was good, and they were really good. So I think, especially now, there's 16 teams in the league. Schedule plays a big role. But, I mean, on paper, you got Avery Johnson, Dylan Edwards, and a defense coming back that was pretty solid last year. So they'll be one of the better teams in the Big 12. How great depends on a lot of factors.
So what's the significance of Avery Johnson being invited to the Manning quarterback camp?
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool deal. I was going to ask, has Kansas's quarterback been invited to that or no?
I don't think so. At least I didn't get any email or anything about it that I saw. I was a little surprised that if he wasn't invited, but I don't know. Jalen can't stay healthy. It seems like ever. Fortunately, it seems like his rehab from his knee surgery, they said it called it minor knee procedure, which I don't think there's any such thing as a minor knee procedure in my book. As somebody who's had knee surgeries, it seems to be going well. But no, I haven't seen anything about Jalen getting invited to that.
Okay, I was gonna say, I mean, it is prestigious. If you get the invite to this thing, you're the Manning family. It's kind of they're giving you the stamp of approval. It means you're at least pretty good, I will say it doesn't mean you're elite. They still bring in like 40, 45 quarterbacks. So there are a couple guys on there who aren't the greatest, pro prospects in the world, but it shows you're on the map. And the last 2 guys that represented Kansas State at the Manning camp were Skylar Thompson and Will Howard. Both are in the NFL right now, actually playing for the Steelers behind Aaron Rodgers. So a good sign of what is out there, and I'm interested just to see what he can learn out there, because even though he'll be out there technically as a camp counselor helping high school players develop, he's going to be learning a lot from the Mannings and spending a lot of times with other top quarterbacks. I think they assign him roommates, so he could end up being a roommate with any number of great quarterbacks from across the country. So that's actually one thing I'm really looking forward to talking with him about at Big 12 Media Days, because I think that happens pretty quick afterwards. What did you learn from that? And yeah, it's a cool honor and something he should be proud of.
All right, great conversation. Always love talking college sports with Kellis Robinett and Shreyas Laddha. Big thanks to our producers, Randy Mason and Monty Davis, and to our editors, Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen. This has been SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports Podcast, and we'll do it again soon.